Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Yod Chet. At the beginning of this third perek, we learned a Mishnah about category mismatches. If, for example, while doing Kemisah, one has in mind that one is going to eat tomorrow something that is normally burnt, like the livona, or that one is going to burn something tomorrow that is normally eaten, like the remainder of the flour. In such a case, Tana Kama says that's kosher, it's totally fine. That intention doesn't make sense, and therefore we just ignore that wrong intention, and it's a kosher sacrifice. Rabbi Eliezer, however, says it is pasul. When he says pasul, that suggests that it's a pasul midrabanan, but on a deoraita level, it's okay, because if it was no good on a deoraita level, then it would also be pigul. Now, the Gemara then quoted Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Aseh, quoting Rabbi Yochanan, who gave a pasuk as a source for Rabbi Eliezer. Now, if you give a pasuk, that suggests that it's deoraita, and therefore it should be not only pasul, but also pigul. So we ask about that too, Rav Aseh, and he says, actually, and in fact, Rabbi Zera asks this question and says, actually, Rav Aseh, you're the one who said yourself that Rabbi Eliezer agrees that there's not karet. So which one is it? You're saying two opposite things. And Rabbi Aseh answers, in fact, it's a machloket Tanaim, that there are later Tanaim that interpret Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, a relatively early Tana. So the later Tanaim have two different interpretations about two different traditions about what Rabbi Eliezer said. One said, he says, it is in fact pasul deoraita and therefore liable to karet, and the other opinion was, no, only drabanan, and therefore it's pasul, but not pigul. In order to support this theory that there are two traditions in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, we quoted a baraita, and the baraita says, let's read the baraita again because we're going to give a different interpretation of it today. All these are category mismatches, and Tanakama says it's kosher. Rabbi Eliezer says pasul. Good. So this we know from the Mishnah already. But then the Baraita introduces a new case. Laniach midamo lemachar Rabbi Yehuda posel. Not that he's going to do something wrong tomorrow, like eat or consume in some way or burn, but rather that he's just going to leave the blood over till the next day. He's not going to sprinkle it today. It's not clear if that's worse or better. Rabbi Yehuda says that's pasul. And then Rabbi Elazar, this is not Rabbi Eliezer, but rather this is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and he says, in response to this statement of Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Af bazor Rabbi Eliezer poseh v'chachamim machshirim, that Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim would disagree about this case also, the same thing that they said above about the category mismatch case, they would also say about the case of where you leave the blood over until tomorrow. Rabbi Eliezer says pasul, and Chachamim machshirim. Now, we said, what's the difference between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yehuda? And does Rabbi Yehuda agree with Rabbanan, or does he agree with Rabbi Eliezer? And we concluded that it must be that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that Rabbi Eliezer would say chayav karet in the case of a category mismatch, and he would say pasul in the case of leaving the blood over till tomorrow. Whereas Rabbi Elazar says that Rabbi Eliezer would say pasul in both cases. And so you see here that there is in fact a machloket Tanaim about what Rabbi Eliezer says in the category mismatch case. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer would say pigul, and according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Eliezer would say pasul, and so that supports the theory of Rabbi Aseh that there are two different versions, two different traditions about what Rabbi Eliezer said. That's where we left off. But now we're going to say, no, that is not the simplest explanation of that baraita. Lo dekule alma karet leka. No, in fact, everyone agrees that there's no karet in the case of the category mismatch. V'hacha shalosh mahalokot badavar. And what we have in this baraita is three different opinions about what Rabbi Eliezer and Tanakama say. as follows. Tanakama sabar, behanach pelige, lehaniach dibra kol kasher. Regarding the category mismatch, we say, I'm going to eat tomorrow something that should be burnt, or burn tomorrow something that is normally eaten. That's where you have the machloket. The Eliezer says pasul, Tanakama Rabbanan say it's kasher. But if you're going to leave it over, if you have intention while doing the shechita of an animal to leave the blood over till the next day, everyone agrees that that's kosher. That's not as bad. You're just having intention to leave something over, not intention to actually do something wrong with it on the next day. And so that's not as bad. And the B. Eliezer would agree that that's kosher. That's the opinion of Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda takes the exact opposite approach, that regarding category mismatch, there they argue. For sure they argue there, because that's what it says explicitly in the beginning of the Braita, and also in our Mishnah. But in the case where you're going to leave it over until the next day, leave the blood over till the next day, and not sprinkle it tomorrow, everybody agrees that's pasul. Even the Rabbanan would say pasul. My ta'ama, gezerah miksat damo, tu kol damo, v'chol damo, pesula deoraita. We have a gezerah of if you might have intention to leave over part of the blood, that would be a gezerah for a case where you would leave over all the blood. And that would certainly be pasul. If you leave all the blood over, that means you didn't sprinkle any blood on the day of shechita. Well, then you missed out on the main thing that you have to do with the korban. So for sure, that's no good mideoraita. Because that's no good mideoraita, we have a gezerah, even about leaving part of it over. Detanya, amar lehem Rabbi Yehuda, iatem modim li she'im hinicho lemachar shepasul, chisheb lahaniach lemachar name pasul. There's a baraita that's commenting on a Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim about the case like this, where someone has intention to leave it till the next day. And there, Rabbi Yehuda says to the Chachamim, don't you agree with me that if you would leave it over till the next day, it would be pasul? So you see from this statement, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, you agree with me, right? So we can assume that, in fact, yes, the rabbis do agree with Rabbi Yehuda about this. If you actually leave it over until the next day, certainly it's pasul. And Rabbi Yehuda is assuming that if actually leaving it over to the next day is pasul, then also thinking about leaving it over, intending to leave it over to the next day while you're doing shechita, also will be pasul. And so we see that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that about Chachamim. That's how that's in their conversation to Chachamim. And so Rabbi Yehuda says that although there is a machloket when it comes to the case where you say, I'm going to eat that which is burnt, or burn that which is eat. There, the rabbis say, that's category mismatch. It doesn't make, your words don't make any sense. And therefore, we just throw that intention out. It's kosher. But here, this does make sense to leave over the something that should be sprinkled. That means I'm saying I'm not going to do the sprinkling. I'm going to leave it over to the next day. So that is a functional sentence that makes sense. That therefore that's a problematic sentence, and it ruins the korban and it makes it pasul, although as a gezerah. And that's the second opinion. And Rabbi Elazar says, just like there's a machloket when they have the category mismatch, so too here, where you say, I'm going to leave the blood over to the next day, there's also machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says, pasul chachamim machshirim. The point here is that nobody says that there's pigul in the category mismatch. There's nobody says, not for Rabbi Eliezer, none of the three opinions here think that there's any pigul, and therefore this rejects Rabbi Aseh's statement above, that there's a pasuk that comes from the Torah, and according to that, it would be deoraita and would be pigul, and that some people say it's pigul, and he claims that in this baraita shows that there's machloket about pigul. Rabbi Yehuda would say pigul. No, now we interpret this baraita totally differently. Everyone agrees regarding the case of a category mismatch that is explicit in the Baraita and in our Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says pasul, not pigul, just pasul. Hachamim say it's okay. The machloket, three-way machloket in this Baraita is about the case where you say, I'm going to leave the blood till tomorrow, where Tanakama says everyone agrees it's okay. Rabbi Yehuda says everyone agrees it's pasul, and Rabbi Elazar says it's a machloket between the earlier Tanaim about that case. Okay, so now we rejected that proof. Now we ask a question about this itself. V'savar Rabbi Yehuda lehaniach midamo l'machar dibra kol pasul. Is that true that Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda Stam is the fourth generation, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Not to be confused with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in the fifth generation. They're going to come up, who's going to come up in the next source. Now, is it true that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that everyone agrees, even Chachamim would agree that if you say, I'm going to leave over the blood till tomorrow, that is pasul v'hatanya. Look at this baraita. Amar Rabbi, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Keshe'alachti lemasot midotai es Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. V'amri la lemasot midotav shel Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Says, when I went to, it means to study with Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua is Rabbi Elazar, that stam that we saw above. And so he says, L'masot midotai literally means to empty out my measuring cup. Like when you're pouring something, I'll say, I'm selling you oil. I'm pouring it out, and so there's still a little bit left. So I'm going to pour it out and leave it for a while to make sure every last drop gets sold. So here, he wants to get every last drop of questions that he has. So he goes to the Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua to do that. Or another version is, he wanted to receive every last drop of learning from Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. So he went there to learn from him. Okay, anyway, the point is that I wanted to go and clarify these various points with Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. When I went there, Masati Yosef HaBavli Yoshev Lefanav. I found the sage called Yosef HaBavli. This is actually quite interesting because almost all the Tanaim that we are from Eretz Yisrael. We don't know of many Tanaim from Bavel. We don't know much about what was going on in Bavel during the time of the Tanaim. So here we have one, Yosef HaBavli. He came from Bavel. He moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he is studying with Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. And Yosef HaBavli was beloved to Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua uniquely, ad le'achat. Some interpret this that the teaching that he was receiving was so wonderful to him, beloved to him, and especially the following issue was beloved to him. Amar lo, Rabbi, hashochet et hazebach le'aniach midamo lemachar mahu. Asking about this very question, Yosef HaBavli is asking Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi happens to be there and is listening to the conversation. He says, what is the halacha if someone does shechita on a korban, having intention that he's going to leave the blood till tomorrow and not sprinkle the blood on that day? Amar lo kasher. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua says it's kosher. He asked again, Arbit, Amar lo kasher. You see that this is why it has to be that Yosef HaBavli was beloved to the teacher, because otherwise he might take it as pestering. He asked the same question at night, and the Elazar says kosher. Shacharit amar lo kasher. Sauraim amar lo kasher. He asked the next morning. He asked that afternoon. Same question, and he says, yes, it's kosher. It's kosher. Mincha amar lo kasher ela sheRabbi Eliezer posel. He asked again in the afternoon, and this time Rabbi Elazar said kosher. That meaning that's the majority opinion. That's my opinion. But actually, Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Ben Hurkanus, says it's pasul. And so maybe this is why Yosef Baliv kept asking. He felt like, there's something more. And sometimes, to get the most out of a teacher, that's what it means to get every last drop. You have to keep asking, keep pressing. Maybe there's another fine point. Maybe there's another opinion in there. And sure enough, there was. Sahavu panav shel Yosef HaBavli, and the face of Yosef HaBavli shined with joy. Oh, I was so happy that now he heard this, that according to Rabbi Eliezer, that is in fact pasul. Amar lo Yosef kimdumei ani shelo kivanenu shemuatenu ad ata. And so now Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua says, oh, Yosef, it seems to me that our halachot, meaning that what I've been teaching you until now, was not accurate because you're so happy that I told you, Rabbi Eliezer says, asur, you weren't happy with all the other times I told you it was kasher. Amar lo Rabbi hen. And Yosef says, in fact, teacher, no, I agree that it is fit. I'm glad that you told me the basic halacha. But now I'm overjoyed that you told me the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who disagrees. Here's why I'm overjoyed. Ela sh'Rabbi Yehuda pasul shana li, vechazarti al kol tamidav, ubikashti li chaver velo masati, achshav sheshaniti li pasul, hechazarta li avedati. So Yosef HaBavli says, one time I heard Rabbi Yehuda, the fourth generation, Rabbi Yehuda, that we've been talking about above, and he taught me, I remember he taught me that in this case it's pasul. And then I went and asked every student of Rabbi Yehuda and to find a friend, to find someone else who heard that also, and I couldn't find anyone. I know I heard that, but now no one else heard that, so maybe I made a mistake, and it was really upsetting to me. I was very frustrated, and that's why I kept asking you about it. And now that you tell me that it's pasul, at least Rabbi Eliezer says pasul, you have returned to me that which is lost. I had a tradition and I lost it, meaning I wasn't sure about it. I didn't know if I could really quote it accurately that Rabbi Yehuda really said this, because maybe I heard wrong because nobody else said it. And now that you quoted it, now I'm so happy. That's why I was so happy. Not that I disagree with your other halacha that you said kasher. Fine, kasher. I trust your authority. But I just wanted to have someone to back up the tradition that I had heard from Rabbi Yehuda. The Braita continues. Zagu enav demaot shel Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. The teacher, Rabbi Elazar, started crying. Amar ashrechem talmidei chachamim shedibrei Torah chabibim alechem beyoter. He was crying out of joy. And he says, happy are you, Torah scholars, for whom matters of Torah are so dear. Look how much you were overjoyed to relearn a tradition that you found, like something is precious that you lost. If you would lose some jewelry, and after many years you finally found it, and it was upsetting to you, right? And so for you, look how Torah is so beloved to you that you're overjoyed like this. So I'm happy, and he's crying out of his happiness. Kara lava mikra hazeh, ma ahavti toratecha kol hayom hi sichati, from Tehillim, how I love your Torah is my meditation all the day. Ha mipnei Rabbi Yehuda beno shel Rabbi Eli, Rabbi Eli tamido shel Rabbi Eliezer, lefichach shana lecha mishnat Rabbi Eliezer. And he explains, this is why Rabbi Yehuda taught you this halacha. Rabbi Yehuda, that's the fourth generation Stam Rabbi Yehuda, is the son of Rabbi Eli, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli. And Rabbi Eli was a student of Rabbi Eliezer. So it makes sense that Rabbi Yehuda heard it from his father, who heard it from Rabbi Eliezer, who said pasul, and that's why he taught you the teaching of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer otherwise was a minority opinion, and that's why most people didn't know about it. And you see, even Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, who knew about it, wasn't going to teach it to him the first 3 times that he asked about it. He put in the back of his mind, yes, he knew about this. So if you're really insisting you want to learn more, okay, yes, there is that opinion, but you see how it's almost lost. This is a good example of a tradition that was taught for some generations and was almost lost, if not for the story, if not that he asked many times about it. It might have been lost. Now we use this Baraita to challenge what we said before. Before we interpreted that Baraita as saying that according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, he thinks that everyone agrees. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan agree that it's pasul when, during Shechita, you have in mind to leave the blood over till the next day and not sprinkle it. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. That's what we said according to Rabbi Yehuda before. But now we ask a question on that from this Baraita. If you think that Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli had taught Yosef HaBavli that everything's pasul, because, right, if you think that's what Rabbi Yehuda thought, that Rabbi Yehuda thought that everyone agrees is pasul, then he would have taught that to Yosef HaBavli. And that's what Yosef HaBavli lost, and he says, thank you for returning that to me. Well, there's a problem here. Why would he say, thank you for returning to me that which has been lost? because Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua did not teach him that everyone says pasul. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua doesn't think that. He taught him that it's a machloket. Rabbi Elazar kept saying, it's kosher, it's kosher. Majority opinion says kosher. Oh, yes, there is a minority opinion. Only Rabbi Eliezer says it's pasul. So Rabbi Elazar himself thinks that's a machloket. So now that Rabbi Elazar told to Yosef HaBavli, oh, there's a machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says it's pasul. Why would Yosef HaBavli says, oh, thank you, you returned to me that which I lost? This is not the same as that which he lost. What he had learned from Rabbi Yehuda, if Rabbi Yehuda says everyone says is pasul, then he would have learned everything is pasul, not that it's a machloket. So why would he say you returned to me that which he lost? Elamai, so let's try out another possibility. Kasher, Rabbi Eliezer posel atniyeh. So what do you think that Rabbi Yehuda taught Yosef HaBavli? Did he teach him that it's a machloket? And according to Rabbi Eliezer, pasul, and everyone else says kasher. Yachi mai ha mipene pelukta. Ananame pelukta kamatnitin. If so, why did Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua explain to Yosef HaBavli? And he says, oh, this is why he taught you the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Because, right, Rabbi Yehuda's father was Eli, and Eli was a student of Rabbi Eliezer. And that's why he taught you the tradition of Rabbi Eliezer. That's not significant. We also teach a dispute. In other words, you don't have to be a student of that school in order to teach an opinion. Everybody quotes a minority opinion, so that doesn't show anything. It would only show that you're devoted to that opinion if you would say, oh, everyone agrees to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, right? That would be an interpretation to say, oh, if I'm from the school of Rabbi Eliezer, I'm a student, and my father is a student of him, it makes sense that your father, Rabbi Eli, who was a student of Rabbi Eliezer, would teach you that Rabbi Eliezer is pasul, and you know what? Everyone agrees with him. Only if you're from the school would you say everyone agrees with them. You wouldn't if you're just reporting that it's a machloket. Well, everybody says, yeah, we know it's a machloket. It doesn't show devotion to that school just to say that there is a minority opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So that doesn't make sense either. So we go back to what we said above. Ela le'olam dibrei kol pasul atniyeh. In fact, we want to establish that Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli had taught Yosef HaBavli that everyone agrees as pasul, both Rabbi Eliezer and Abanan, and that's the way we interpreted the Baraita at the top of this daf. Umay hechezarta li abedati tahadar lemiha shum paslut ba'olam. And when Yosef HaBavli says, thank you for returning that which I lost, he didn't mean that you returned the entire statement of Rabbi Yehuda, who said everyone agrees pasul. He was so happy that at least you returned to me one opinion that is a witness that says that it's pasul. Before I heard that, I remember that Rabbi Yehuda told me that someone says pasul. I couldn't find now anyone who says pasul because nobody was repeating the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and so I felt like I lost a tradition. Now, even just telling me it's machloket, that's a big thing. It took him 4 different questions to get that information. And so finally, at least you told me that, yes, there is one opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that says it's pasul. Oh, someone says pasul? Oh, thank you. Now, that's support for the tradition that I remember that Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli taught me it's pasul. And then it makes sense. Yes, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli taught me that because he's from the school of Rabbi Eliezer. At least he taught, probably Rabbi Yehuda himself said that everybody agrees it's pasul, as we explained above. And so he remembered that, but then you couldn't find anyone else to support it. And even getting a little bit of support, the fact that Rabbi Eliezer said pasul, oh, now I know someone says pasul. Okay, so then I was overjoyed because that supports the tradition that I remember Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli teaching me. The next Mishnah teaches, Lo yasak, lo balal, velo patat, velo malach, velo henif, lo higish, o shepetatan pitim merubot, velo meshachan, keshera. If someone missed any of these steps that you're supposed to do for a korban mincha, it is nevertheless valid. The first one, he did not pour oil on it. For most korban minchas, it requires oil. For those that are prepared in a vessel, you have to put the oil in first, and then you put the flour, and then you put more oil, and you mix it all together, prepare it, break it into pieces, and then you have a third pouring of oil after that, before the kmitza. So ideally, you have a log of oil and you pour it in those 3 stages. Now, this cannot mean that you didn't pour oil at all, because if you're missing oil in a type of korban that needs oil, then it will not be valid. But what it means here is that you didn't pour oil at all 3 stages, but you did pour all of the oil at some point, it's still valid. If one did not mix, you're supposed to put oil and flour oil, then mix it all together. Let's say you poured everything in, all the ingredients are there, but you didn't mix it, that's still okay. If one did not break it up for mincha offerings that are cooked, pan fried, baked, after cooking them, then you have to break it into pieces, smaller pieces, so that you can do kmitza. Otherwise, how are you going to fit a whole loaf or a whole wafer into your hand? So you're supposed to break it up according to a specific sizes, and according to a procedure. If you did not break it up, it's still valid. You're supposed to put salt, any part that gets burnt, on the mizbeach. So for most, the komets would be salted and then burnt. For if a kohen brings a korban mincha, then all of it gets burnt. So then you put salt on all of it. If you didn't put salt, it's still valid. Some korbanot are waived, like the korban ha'omed that we bring on second day of Pesach. It's waived. If you didn't waive it, it's still a kosher korban. You're supposed to bring the bowl of the korban mincha close to the southwest corner of the mizbeach and do the kmitza there. If you didn't do that, still valid. Or, let's say you did, going back to the breaking it apart, if you did break it apart, but you broke it into pieces that were too big, so you broke it, but not in the proper way, not the proper size. Or, lo meshachan, for wafers, you have to smear some oil on at the end, and if you didn't do that, still, it's valid. Gemara comments, "My lo yasak." When it says you didn't pour oil, what does that mean? Ilema lo yasak kelal. Does it mean you didn't pour any oil at all? Ikobaka tabe. But that pasuk says that is required, and you didn't put oil when it needs oil, then it's no good. So how could you say it's kosher? Ela lo yasak kohen elaza. No, what it means is that the oil was placed, but it was not done by a kohen, but rather a non-kohen did it. Even though a non-kohen puts it on, poured the oil on, it's still okay. Yachi lo balal nameh, lo balal kohen elazar, ha lo balal kilal pistula. Now we assume, that all the things in the list are the same case. And if you say the first case is where a non-kohen does it, then when it says did not mix, maybe that also means it was mixed, but not by a kohen. Rather, by a non-kohen mixed it, it's kosher. Well, if that's so, then we can infer from the Mishnah that if it's only okay if a non-kohen mixed it. At least it's mixed. But if it was not mixed at all, then it would not be good. But is that true? That goes against the Mishnah that we learn later on in this Masechet Vatanan. Shishim niblalin. Shishim v'echad and niblalin. If someone wants to bring 60 tenths of an ephah, a standard mincha is at least a tenth of an ephah. You can bring more. That's fine. You can bring up 60, and you can still bring it all together in one in one vessel with the oil, and that's still okay. But if you want to donate 61, then it's no good. It's too much. It won't fit because you can't, and niblalin, it's not mixed properly. 60, you can mix it properly in the vessel, but 61, with the oil, you can't mix it properly. Therefore, you have to split it into 2 vessels if you want to donate that much. We asked about that. Even if you can't be mixed, so what? In other words, 61 can fit in the biggest vessel that they have, but it can't be mixed. You need extra room in order to mix it. And so we asked, so what if you can't mix it? As long as you can fit it in, should be okay. Because here, our Mishnah says, if you didn't mix it, it's still okay. So then why can't you bring 61 as long as it fits inside? Rabbi Zera explained, based on this famous principle, as long as the vessel is big enough that you could mix it if you wanted to, then you don't have to mix it. But if the vessel is not big enough that you could mix it even if you wanted to, then bila me'akevet bo, then the fact that it's not mixed is a problem. And so you see from here that although yes, it's true that it has to be in a vessel that's big enough so that it could be mixed in it. It doesn't actually have to be mixed in it. It just has to be potentially big enough that it could be mixed. Anyway, we learned from here that if you didn't actually mix it, as long as it's in a big bowl, that's fine, and it's still kosher even if it's not mixed. That goes against this inference that we just had here. And so we answer, Midi Iria, who said that every item on the list has to be the exact same case? Hakediita, v'hakediita. This one is this case, and this one is the other case. Lo yasak kohen elazar. Lo balal kelal. When it says the first one that he didn't pour oil, can't mean that he didn't pour oil at all. Then it would not be good. Rather, it means a kohen did not pour the oil, but a non-kohen poured it. That's still okay. And when it says the next item did not mix, that means literally did not mix at all. It's still kosher. או שפתתן פיתים מרובות כשרה, השתה לא פתת כלל כשרה, פיתים מרובות מבעיה. That when it says later in the Mishnah, if the Kohen broke it into big pieces, it's still okay. Wait, but earlier the Mishnah says, if he didn't break it up at all, it's okay. So if he didn't break it up at all, it's okay. If he broke it somewhat, just into big pieces, obviously that's okay. Why would you even have to say that? My pitin merubot sheriba bepetitin. And so we say, what does it mean that there was pitin merubot? It doesn't mean that there were big pieces, but rather he broke it up a lot. Ruba could mean big, or just could mean a lot. It could mean a lot in terms of its size, or a lot in the amount of breaking. So it actually means the opposite, that he broke it up more than necessary, more than required. And even though he broke it up into too many pieces, and each one is smaller than a kezait, that's still kosher. Or another answer. Maybe, go back to literally, it means that he broke it into large pieces, not the proper amount. And I would have thought that in the first case in the Mishnah where he didn't break it up at all, fine, that's called halot. Okay, it's still called chalot, so it still is a significant category. If you broke it into pieces that are properly sized, then it would be called pieces. That's also okay. That's what you're supposed to do. But here, where you broke it up into pieces that are too big, they're too small to be called chalot, and they're too big to be called pititin, the pieces. And so it's not here and not there. It doesn't fit into any category. I might have thought that that's invalid. And therefore, that part of the Mishnah says it's still okay, whether it's whole or proper pieces or in the middle. Even in the middle is still considered a valid offering. Now we're going to propose that the Mishnah does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And we're talking specifically about the first clause that says if he does not pour it, and we just interpreted that to mean if a Kohen doesn't pour it, but a non-Kohen pours it, it's okay. So the Mishnah says if a non-Kohen pours the oil, that's okay. But this next braita from Rabbi Shimon is going to seem to contradict that. The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol Kohen she'eno modeh ba'avoda, en lo chelek ba'kehuna. Any Kohen who does not admit to the significance of the Bet HaMikdash service does not deserve the presents that Kohanim get. שנאמר, המקריב את דם השלמים ואת החלב מבני אהרון, לא תהיה שוק הימין למנה. מודה בעבודה, יש לו חלק בכהונה. שאינו מודה בעבודה, אין לו חלק בכהונה. As the pasuk says, he among the sons of Aaron that offers the blood of the peace offering and the fat. So in other words, if he does the service, which we interpret to mean not that he literally has to do it, because it could be sitting on the side and not doing anything, but the point is that he admits to the significance that this is something that the Torah commands, and this is something that is a holy thing that one must do. And so if he agrees to that, then he will have the right thigh, and for the portion, he gets the various portions and gifts that the Kohanim deserve. So we learn from here that only if he is part of the service, which means that he agrees that this service is divinely ordained, then he has a portion in the Kohen gifts. But if he denies that, then he does not have a portion in the gifts that go to the Kohen. Ve'en li ela zo bilbad. Me'inayin lerabot 15 avodot. Now over here, we just mentioned the blood and the fat. But what about everything else? What about the 15 other avodot that Kohanim do? And then it lists 15 avodot, and so the first one on the list is yitzikot. So that's what we're gonna question from. Above you said that a Kohen doesn't have to do the pouring, but here it sounds like a Kohen does have to do the pouring because it's one of the major items in this baraita, that the Kohen has to admit that this is part of the service and that it's a significant and holy thing to do. And so it's going to list them first, and we'll see the question. Hayitzikot, v'habililot, v'apetitot, v'amelichot, v'tinufot, v'hagashot, v'kimisot, v'haktarot, v'amelikot, v'kabalot, v'zaot, v'ashka'at sota, v'arifat egla, v'taharat mesora, unsiut kapayim, ben mibifnim, ben mibachutz, minayin. So this pasuk only mentioned the offering of the blood and the fat, but how about the pouring of the oil, the mixing of it, the breaking into pieces, the putting of the salt, the waving, bringing close the korban mincha to the southwest corner, doing the kemitza, burning, doing a melika on a bird, receiving the blood, sprinkling the blood, doing the sotah ritual, doing the eglah rufa ritual, cleansing a mesorah, doing birkat kohanim, whether in the Bet HaMikdash or outside. How do you know that if someone denies any of these things, then that Kohen does not deserve to get the priestly gifts? Talmud Omar, mi bnei Aharon, avodah ha-mesurah libnei Aharon, kol kohen she'eno modeh ba, en lo chelek ba kehuna. Because it says in the pasuk, from the sons of Aharon, which means any service that is given over to the Kohanim. If a Kohen does not agree to it, then he does not deserve the portions of the priestly gifts. What we see here is that yitzikot is mentioned on the list of items that are given over to the Kohanim, meaning that a Kohen has to do it. So this is all the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So it looks like Rabbi Shimon thinks that a Kohen has to do the pouring. But the inference that we made from our Mishnah sounds like a Kohen does not have to do the pouring. So which one is it? We have an answer. Amar Rav Nachman, la kashya, kan b'minchat kohanim, kan b'minchat Yisrael. It depends on the case. Rabbi Shimon, who said that the Kohen has to do it, that's a korban mincha that a Kohen himself is offering. When a Kohen himself brings a korban mincha, then it entirely gets burnt, the whole thing. And so you don't have to do a kemitza on that because you're burning the whole thing anyway. In that case, a Kohen has to do the pouring of the oil. But in a regular korban mincha that Israel brings, where the Kohen is going to do the kemitza, so there, the Israel who brings it, he can do the pouring of the oil. Minchat Yisrael debat kemisa hi, mekemisa ve'elach mitzvat kehuna. Limed al yitzika belila shekeshera bezar. So here's the explanation. When a Yisrael brings a korban mincha, where you have to do kemisa, because only the komets will be burnt and the rest of it the kohanim will eat. So from kemisa and on, doing the kemisa, bringing it to the fire, burning it on the fire, all that only kohanim can do. So since we know that stuff Kohanim have to do, we learn that the things beforehand, the pouring of the oil, the mixing, those activities can be done by a non-Kohen. However, minchat Kohanim de la bat kemitzahi meikara baya kehuna. But for the korbanot that the Kohanim themselves bring, where you're not doing any kemitzah, there you need the Kohen to start off and pour the oil to begin with. And this resolves the contradiction. Our Mishnah that taught that a non-Kohen can pour the oil was talking about Minchat Yisrael. Rabbi Shimon, who said that a Kohen has to do it, was talking about a korban mincha of Kohanim. Amar le Rava, mikdi minchat Kohanim, mehecha itrabe liyesika, b'minchat Yisrael, matam keshra bezar, afacha name keshra bezar. However, Rava objects to this answer because he says, after all, regarding minchat Kohanim, how do you know that you have to do the pouring of the oil? Where do we learn it from? We learn it from the minchat Yisrael, from a standard, regular mincha. So just like like over there in Minchat Yisrael, a non-Kohen can do it, so too, since that's the source where you're learning it from, the Minchat Kohanim also should be permitted to do the pouring with a non-Kohen. And so Rava challenges Rav Nachman's answer. That's one version of Rav Nachman's answer. There's another version of Rav Nachman's answer and Rava's response. It's almost the same as the first one, just different wording. Ika de Amre, Amar Rav Nachman, la kashya, kan ba nikmasot, kan be she'en nikmasot. No, there's no problem. One case where the Mishnah says that a non-Kohen can do it, can do the pouring of the oil, is regarding any mincha offering where there is a kemitzah. Then the kemitzah and on has to be done by the Kohen. But before the kemitzah, the pouring of the oil and the mixing can be done by a non-Kohen. Whereas the baraita that said that has to be a Kohen, that's talking about any korbanot where there is no kemitzah. The only difference between the first and second versions of this would be that the second version can include not only a korban mincha that's brought by a kohen, but also other types of korban mincha where there's no kemitzah, like the korban mincha that you bring together with a korban shelamim as an accompaniment that also gets all burnt, so there's no kemitzah. So that would be definitely included in the second version. So he says that's the difference between the two. They're talking about different types of korbanot. Amar le Rava, mikidish enik masot mechait rebele yisika, and Rava challenges this. How do we know that regarding those mincha offerings that where you don't do kemitzah, how do you know that in those cases there is an obligation to pour the oil? Minik masot, we learned it from those korbanot where you do kemitzah. Kinik masot, ma hatam keshera bezar, afachaname keshera bezar, ela machvarta matnitin de la kerebi Shimon. And since you're learning it from those korbanot that require kemitzah, we should learn also that just like over there a non-kohen can pour it, so too in these, even though you're not doing kemitzah, the oil also has to be poured, can be poured by a non-Kohen. And so that's a challenge against Rav Nachman's answer. Rather, we go back to what we said in the beginning. It seems clear that the Mishnah is not the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Mishnah thinks that a non-Kohen can pour the oil. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it has to be a Kohen who pours the oil. The continuation, on the next daf, we'll see the sources for each of these opinions. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.